Hi, I'm Mafi. I'm an Access and Wellness counselor. When I think of inclusion, I think of everybody being at the same table, of telling people that they are important regardless of what their background or their experiences, or the color of your skin or your socioeconomic status may be, or any other trait that defines you. I think it's about celebrating our differences and learning from each other to really understand what brings us together rather than what drives us apart. This is why I am part of Turn the Tide, because we are able to connect with our colleagues through having conversations that are meaningful, through being able to identify our shared experiences and again, talk about those things that we have in common rather than what makes us different, but still being able to celebrate those differences together. I think it helps us go away from being in a place of judgment and really opening the door to breaking down the barriers that prevent, inclusivity within the workplace.
Hi, I'm Teresa. I'm the Director of Faculty Support and Development and a member of the Turn the Tide team. As I think about inclusion and what Turn the Tide events mean to me, I'm remembering one of my favorite ever theorists that I studied in school, a Russian writer named Mikhail Bakhtin. Bakhtin broke down the Russian word for event, "событие," into its two roots. Sa means with, and bit means being. So an event essentially is being with or a co-being. And Bakhtin theorized that when we read narratives or listen to someone's story, we are in an ethical event because we are moving outside of our plane of being and entering into a co-being with our narrator. And it dawned on me that that's a great way to describe Turn the Tide events. They're ethical co-beings because they encourage us to move outside of our plane of understanding into a broader understanding of our community, which I'm so happy to be a part of with you.
Hey everyone, I'm Christina Hawkins from Student Affairs. Inclusion to me is not just about having diverse representation at the table, but ensuring that everyone has the right tools to succeed and opportunity to have their voice heard and listened to. This second phase of Turn the Tide allows opportunities for all of us to connect more meaningfully. Our team, along with your facilitator team, are here to serve as guides so that all voices can be acknowledged and heard. We have these conversations and we do this work for each other and ultimately to better serve our students. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, I'm Tamika Fitzpatrick, lead faculty of the Department of Education and Liberal Arts. When I think of diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think of intercultural responsiveness. For me, that means listening to and seeking feedback from individuals from diverse backgrounds in both thought and observable characteristics so that we can better understand and benefit from those differences. I also think it requires that we take action to promote a culture that benefits from that diversity by involving stakeholders and considering the impact of our actions on individuals beyond those physically represented. As a part of a geographically dispersed community, Turn the Tide is a meaningful way to connect beyond our traditional work roles. For me, Turn the Tide provides a safe place to learn about my colleagues, the things that impact them, the issues they advocate for, and the contributions we each make to the UAGC culture. During the last year, we have collectively experienced a number of life-changing events. So in a time where it is easy to feel isolated, my desire is that those who participate in this effort build relationships, strengthen partnerships, and extend their social networks beyond their work site, state, and any one initiative.
Hi everybody, it's Rachel from Student Affairs. I'm here today to tell you a little bit about why Turn the Tide is so meaningful to me. This first phase introduced so many of us to different community members across the institution and enabled us to have really rich and meaningful dialogue. In this next phase, I'm hopeful that everyone sees why this piece is so important to me, that each one of us can be a part of the change, and together we're stronger. And each of us can make a change from whatever our seat at the table is, right? So my hope is that we can come together and help really cultivate and sustain a more inclusive environment here.
You know, my grandmother was born and raised in the hills and in the woods of Lynchburg, Virginia. But she had a wisdom that surpassed many and taught me the greatest lesson about inclusion that I ever learned. It was several years ago that my sisters and I were at her 100th birthday party. And she sat us down and she asked us, she said, "So what are you doing with life?" Well, my oldest sister said, "Well, I'm a doctor with my own practice." And my middle sister explained how she's a project engineer and owns apartment buildings. I explained how I get to be an educator. Well, Grandma folded her arms and she leaned back in that tattered chair of hers and she displayed a smile that was full of pride and full of wisdom. Then she leaned into us and she said, "Now you young people never forget that there were a whole lot of black folk that sacrificed their life and they died just so you can walk into those rooms where you're doing all the great things that you're doing. So you need to understand that that sacrifice has been made so you belong there. So lift up your head and stick out your chest and do your absolute best and make us all proud. You understand?" So we all, "Yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am." Then she said, "Now you need to make sure that if you're in a room and you're tolerated, that you leave that room. You only stay in the rooms where you're celebrated. And whoever comes in that room after you where you're celebrated, you make sure that whether you like them or don't like them, whether they like you or don't like you, whether they're the same as you or different than you make sure that you make them feel celebrated. Because everybody has something to put on the table." She said, "Besides, ain't nothing worse than being invited to the park and not being allowed to play." So, piggybacking off the wisdom of my 100-year-old grandmother, inclusion is the presence of a diverse population and the integration of that population into the lifeblood of the organization, but most of all, the acceptance of the cultural tendencies and the value-adding experiences that that population brings to the organization. You see, inclusion is not just being invited to the park, it's the expectation that when I get to the park, I'm going to be able to play like everybody else.